President Trump just finished addressing the American people, emphatically defending his America First agenda, touting his accomplishments, and blaming the Biden administration for the problems he says he inherited and has been busy fixing.
A lot. Joining us now is UC Berkeley political science professor Steve Fish. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. I imagine you took a lot of notes, quite a bit to unpack there. What was your first impression?
Well, Vicki, it was just a pack of nonsense. It's hard to know where to start. You know, he launched with a statement about inflation, saying that when he came to office, it was the worst in history. Inflation actually was 2.9% when Trump came to office. It had been down for a couple of years before he came to office after the COVID-induced spike. It is now 3%, so it's about the same as it was when he came to office. He talked about crime having been at record levels under Biden, which is also untrue. He showed us more of his Biden obsession. He talked about now us having the most powerful military in the world. It wasn't before. Of course, it was before. In fact, the military before was in some ways more powerful. It was certainly less demoralized. Hegseth and Trump have done more than any other administration imaginable to actually demoralize the military. He called the economy a total disaster under Biden, and he said that wages have been running ahead of inflation for some time now, and said that that was not the case under Biden. Actually, for the last 18 months running before Trump was elected, inflation had been slower than wage growth. It's really hard to know what else to say here. He talked about the insurance companies controlling the Democratic Party in the realm of healthcare. Of course, exactly the opposite is true. Talked about corrupt interests plundering the American people. Of course, that's exactly what's happening under Trump. These aren't even partisan matters, Vicki and Grant. These are just facts. What we saw really out of Trump today, too, in terms of his style, was a kind of desperate, speaking style. Usually he's a little more self-assured. Tonight he was speaking very quickly, like he was trying to get through what he had to say. Not clear why that was the case, but he was. This is quite something to behold.
That he thinks more Americans would be supporting him if they heard more about what he perceives to be his accomplishments. You obviously don't support President Trump, but for his, loyal supporters, do you think the red meat he threw out there was effective in rallying the base?
I don't think it would be any more effective, Grant, than anything else he says. I didn't hear anything new or interesting out of him. It's the same kind of stuff he says every day. And I think said probably in a less compelling way than sometimes he says it from the standpoint of his supporters. So I'm not really sure what he thinks he stood to gain from this speech. I actually was expecting something maybe a little bit new, maybe something a little bit more provocative or interesting. What we saw was just kind of ranting on and on with these statistics and facts that are false. I didn't hear anything new, if I were a Trump supporter, I wouldn't have looked at the speech and said, yeah, wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that. So I'm not really sure what he gained out of this speech. Look, he's way down on the polls. The economy is turning down, and unemployment is actually up. In complete contradistinction to what Trump himself said tonight. I think he seemed kind of desperate, and that's not the kind of thing that plays well, I think, with his base.
So the president and his party are less than a year away from the midterms. This could be a pivotal moment in that. Do you think that it's going to shift the balance at all, or do you think it's a foregone conclusion that things are going to, change in the House and in the Senate?
Well, Vicki, a year is an eternity in politics. We really don't know what's going to happen in the midterms. We know that Trump is relatively unpopular right now. We know that the Democrats did well last month in the handful of elections that were held at that time. A lot depends on what the Democrats do now. Will they capitalize on the advantages they seem to have at the current moment? That, an awful lot depends on that. We can count on Trump to be Trump. I don't think he's going to change in any way. He has a total grip on his party. We can be sure that most of his party are not going to stand up to him no matter what he does. It doesn't matter what an attack on democracy stages or how bad the economy gets. It's a sure thing that the vast majority of congressional Republicans will stick with Trump no matter what. We don't know what's going to happen with the economy. We don't know what's going to happen in foreign policy as well. There are all kinds of wild cards out there when it comes to events that could affect the midterms coming up next year. We don't know if Trump is going to invade Venezuela. If that invasion happens and the government is switched very quickly and it's bloodless and it's unproblematic and Venezuela gets democracy, that could be a blow in favor of Trump. I think that's probably much less likely than for things to be very messy. That could actually redound to the harm of Trump and the Republicans. But, remember, a year is an awful lot of time. And the Democrats are, in political terms, the midterms in political terms are an awful long way away.
What they pay for things than what's going on in Venezuela. In terms of health care, you had the 4 Republicans in the House break with their party today and vote with Democrats to try to keep those, Obamacare subsidies in effect. What do you think is going to happen with this in the Senate and come January, practically speaking, for people's wallets?
Well, so far, Grant, the Republicans have really stuck with Trump. You mentioned the 4 votes, but that's a very small percentage of Republican votes. What's that? 1 out of 50 members of the House breaking with Trump. For the most part, they stick with him. And I think they're going to stick with him. I don't think the Republicans are going to move toward the Democrats on health care. And Trump went on and on about health care today and how the Democrats made it more expensive and more inaccessible. None of that, of course, is true. But for the most part, it looks like the Republicans are going to stick with Trump on health care. They're going to stick with him on pretty much everything else as well. Trump brought up how the United States was being laughed at in the world before, and now that he's in charge of foreign policy, that, the United States is taken seriously. Of course, exactly the opposite is true. The United States was respected in the world. The United States maintained strong alliances with its traditional allies. It was aiding Ukraine strongly. It was the leader of the free world, as it had been for over 8 decades before Trump came to power. Now something that's historically unprecedented has happened, which is that Trump has traded in our leadership of our force multiplying alliances and of the free world for junior partnership in Vladimir Putin's autocracy international. That's also an interesting change, completely in contradistinction to what he said tonight. That's something I think the Democrats need to make a much bigger deal of with the midterms coming up. The Democrats tend to want to just focus on the economic issue of the hour. Right now, it's affordability. And I think they make a big mistake by thinking that somehow they're going to keep squeezing by on affordability or whatever the economic issue of the day happens to be. I think they need a much bigger, broader case against MAGA that includes America's role in the world, that includes democracy and Trump's attacks on democracy. If they don't do that, I think it's possible that the Republicans will still come out doing okay in next year's midterm elections. A lot depends on what the Democrats do.
Get a deep breath here. A lot to think about. We really appreciate your insights. Steve, UC Berkeley political science professor Steve Fish. Have a good evening.
My pleasure, Vicki.
All right, got to take a quick break. More news coming up right after this.